Mr. Sheikh worked for the British Columbia Ministry of Health in the role of Director of Labor Relations. He was also General Counsel and Director of Legal Services for the British Columbia Nurses Union. Please help me welcome Umar Sheikh.
All right, well, thank you very much. We'll try and keep this in 10 minutes. I've got my speech carefully written out. That was a bit about my background, so I won't go too much into that. It's quite boring. But I will tell you a quick story to start of how I got involved in this movement. So about 2 years ago, I was walking with my son. He was 10 years old, and we were downtown Victoria. It was a nice, beautiful summer day. And there was this couple that was carrying a Canadian flag on their way to the legislature. And they were going there to protest and be in solidarity of the truckers. And all of a sudden, this mob right on Government Street formed around this elderly couple, and they started accosting them. What rights of yours have been violated? How dare you do this? And clearly, these were some woke people around them. And so I said to my son, I said, okay, Dad's got to get involved. Come with me. We're going to go and talk to these people. And my son was just bewildered, saying, why would we do that? And so I walked in the middle of the crowd and I said, listen, stop accosting these people. I'll explain what rights have been violated to you. I'll give you some examples. And I went through them in a very calm, professional way. And then something happened that changed the course of my history forever. Have you ever heard something so stupid that it makes you question your own reality? So I explained to these protesters, some of which were some very, let's call them flamboyant gentlemen. So I explained to them around what rights are being violated and why these people have a right to carry the Canadian flag and go to the legislature. And they look right at me and one guy yells out, "You're a white supremacist." I was stunned. For a minute there, it made me question my reality. I looked down, I said, I am? I looked at my son, and my son says to me, Dad, are we white supremacists? I said, don't tell your mother, son. Don't tell your mother. We don't want to talk about this at home. The stupidity of that statement really sums up the counter-narrative and how they tried to pigeonhole folks of every creed and every ilk into these ridiculous categories of who they were. And so I decided, thank you. So we got those nice elderly folks. By the way, they were Portuguese. We got those nice elderly folks where they were going, and the mob dispersed a bit after the stupidity of the commentary. And I decided, okay, it's time to help. One of the things that I've done in my career is I've spent years fighting governments and winning at those fights. And one of the last ones that we did was on the flu vaccine mandates, and we were able to get those declared invalid and off of healthcare workers in this province. So the phone starts ringing, as all the lawyers, the fantastic lawyers that are here will tell you, their phones were ringing off the hook when these mandates came down. People were desperate, begging for help. And so we're getting thousands of calls. I'm answering these calls, and I'm starting to understand how desperate people are. You see, when you take away everything from an employee, when you take their job, when you take their homes, when you take their ability to buy gifts for their children, you're not just damaging them temporarily. You're not just suspending a right. Taking a man or woman's livelihood away is akin to killing them. That is exactly what was happening. And so as we started signing up clients to start beginning this fight, and we had clients in government, we had clients who were police officers, clients in aviation, clients in healthcare, the first tragic events began to occur. We had 3 suicides in the groups that we represent. 3 people who had nothing left and everything taken away from them had taken their own lives, saying there was no other way. There was no other way when they were losing their house and they had to look their kids in the face. There was no other way when they couldn't put food on the table. And so we knew that there had to be a different way to practice law in this country. Lawyers are notoriously expensive, thank God. But they're notoriously expensive beasts, and access to legal is extremely expensive. When I get to the flu case, I'll tell you how we spent $2 million fighting that one mandatory vaccination order. So we said, okay, here's what we have to do. How do I deal with thousands of clients who are at the bottom of their lives in great despair and great mental health issues? It's almost impossible to have a working relationship with people who are so down and out and have nothing left. And so we said, we're going to develop something called the karmic retainer, which was the first of its kind, I'm proud to say, anywhere in Canada. And what we said was we would be willing to take on these groups, whether you were a public servant or a healthcare worker or anybody else, we'd be willing to take you on. But the first thing you had to do was organize yourselves into your own group. And then once you did that, you had to create a hardship fund for each other, to help each other pay rent, to help each other buy gifts, groceries, anything that people needed. Any fundraising that these groups do first goes to them, not to pay our legal fees. And that was imperative for us in trying to build a sustainable culture of litigants. We then looked at, thank you. We then looked at counseling services. So we have groups in healthcare. We have, and there was a great doctor talking about trading out services, but we have groups in healthcare. And we said, you can provide mental health support. You guys can create communities where you guys meet every week and you can debrief, you can provide one-on-one counseling. And so that became a condition of the retainer as well, that all of those services had to be there. And then after that, if they could afford to pay us, great. And if they couldn't, that was fine too. We were going to waive the bill and we weren't going anywhere in our representation of these groups. And so I want to introduce you to a few of the people, just real quick, that are the heroes that are living this karmic retainer every day. In the back, you have two healthcare workers, Jed and Terry, who have been fired from their jobs. You have Philip Davidson from the BC Public Servants for Freedom, terminated from their positions. There's my friend Faye in the back from Helijet, terminated from her position in aviation. And so we began to amass these clients, and we're now representing about 25,000 people around this country. And we have them all in various groups, all under the karmic retainer model. And I'm very proud to say that there has not been a single suicide in our group since that time. So let's talk about the flu vaccine case, just so people get that their victories are possible when it comes to this. So in 2009, the government of British Columbia introduced a mandatory flu vaccination program. We took it to court. I was CEO, not just general counsel, just to let you know, I was CEO of the nurses union at the time. And so we took it to court, and the court said, look, the evidence that's been presented by the government says that this thing is 99.9% effective. This flu vaccine. It was a complete match in 2009. And so because it's a complete match, and the patients that we're dealing with at the time, it was a care home in Kelowna, it was elderly patients with comorbidities, they said, look, this is a completely legitimate way to impose an employment condition, and so we're not going to let you win. So we lost that case. It's public, you can look it up right now, but we lost it in 2009. In 2012, different parties decided to challenge the flu vaccine mandate, and they took it all the way through arbitration, the number of unions in this country, and they lost those cases. Arbitrators said, look, you know, we're looking at 70% now efficacy, and between those effective numbers and the people who would get the flu, this makes sense and we're not going to let you win. We started another challenge in 2014. In 2015, the flu was a 0% match with the vaccine that was available. It was a complete mismatch year. In 2016, it was a complete mismatch year. And by the time 2018 rolled around and we were still in this fight, we were still in the courts, we were still in arbitrations, The flu vaccine had a stated efficacy at the time of close to 48, 49%. And what we were able to show was that when you deal with a test in any employment situation, your objective in the policy that you're putting out must be proportionate and reasonable to what you want to accomplish. For example, if you don't want more accidents on the road and you say we're going to accomplish this by making everyone drive a red car, well, that's a pretty stupid objective. It doesn't actually make sense in stopping accidents on the road. And so we were able to show that because the efficacy of the vaccination wasn't there, it wasn't proportional or reasonable for individuals to go forward and be forced to vaccinate or lose their jobs. At the same time, we had a wonderful doctor who was, and doctors are always the solution to these things, I got to tell you. But we had a wonderful doctor who was a surgeon at BC Children's. He had a long wait list of children who needed these maxillofacial surgeries. And so these are kids with severe deformities. It's a huge wait list. It's 2 or 3 years before they get this surgery. And he said, I don't want to be vaccinated for the flu. Go ahead and shut down my surgeries. When you cannot consistently apply a policy throughout the entire healthcare system, that policy fails. This is part of the established legal test of how policies operate. And so when we took consistency of application, because of course they didn't shut down his surgeries, the minister needs his time on the news and media, et cetera. And so they didn't shut down the surgeries, and we were able to show it wasn't effective, and then we started working with Bonnie Henry. And then an individual who was working at the BC CDC, and her and I would spend a great deal of time talking on the phone and in person around what these vaccines did and didn't do. And so she gave this great testimony for us that said, masks don't work. This is on the record. This is on the record. This is on the record testimony. She was an expert. She came in, she said, look, these masks only work for about 20 minutes unless you change them. After that, they're as good as useless. And so we knew masks didn't work. And then Bonnie said, mandates don't work. This is Bonnie Henry, the Bonnie Henry I knew at the time anyway. Mandates don't work. And so she became public health officer, and we were able to finally get the flu vaccine mandates out for all of healthcare. And so today, no one has to get the flu vaccination in order to work in this province as a result of that. So we were very happy about that. But when we look at that case, that was 10 years. 10 years from inception to victory. This is a very slow-moving train. The harm that they caused was almost immediate in terms of what we deal with in timing as lawyers. I have a lot of clients who want to get the next gratification. When are we going to win? Well, let me explain this. You have to lose before you win in the legal system. There are a number of times where you need negative decisions to appeal, and appeal again, and appeal again, and then the time that goes between then, it really starts to benefit a case, and eventually you can make change, but it takes a great deal of time to do it. There's a story or a case I want to tell you about. I was a lawyer in the US before I was a lawyer in Canada. There's a gentleman, his name was Dred Scott. Now, Dred Scott, this is 1857. Dred Scott was a black man who said he wanted to be known as a person and have all the rights of the US Constitution. And in 1857, the Supreme Court of the United States said, you are not a human being, you are not a person, and you will have no rights. Now, fast forward 97 years to 1954. We have Brown versus Board of Education. The first decision that says you cannot segregate based on race and color, and that everyone should be treated equally under the law. 97 years, the exact same Constitution, the exact same language, interpreted in a very different way. And so I know that a lot of times people lose hope. I know you do. You say, we're not winning. We're not out there winning these cases. We're not getting the big headlines. What I'm here to tell you is that it takes time. Don't give up belief in your Constitution. Don't give up belief in your rights under this charter. It may be as imperfect as everyone else says it is, but it is the girl that brought us to the dance. and we danced with the girl we came with, at least hopefully. Anyways, those are my 10 minutes. Thank you so much for listening. My name's Omar Sheikh.